The music wasn't even that loud. That's the part that still makes me laugh when I think about it. It was a Friday night, just after sunset, and my garage door was halfway open to let the heat out. A couple of folding tables, a cooler full of soda, some burgers on a small grill. Nothing wild. Just a few friends unwinding after a long week. Laughter bounced off the concrete walls, and an old rock playlist hummed in the background. That's when I saw her.
Karen.
She stood at the edge of my driveway like she owned the street, arms crossed tight, lips pinched so hard they almost disappeared. She wore her usual uniform, pastel cardigan, clipboard clutched to her chest, and that look, like she'd been personally offended by Joy. She didn't say hello. She never did. Instead, she stared, counted, took notes. I leaned over to Mike and nodded toward her. $10 says she calls the HOA. Mike grinned, lifting his drink.
Nah.
Tonight feels special. I'm guessing 911. That got a few chuckles. Nobody took it seriously because why would we? We weren't breaking any rules. No fireworks. No blocked driveways. No yelling. Just a relaxed garage party. Karen turned on her heel and marched back to her house. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A neighbor texted, "Dude, cops are on the way." Before I could even respond, red and blue lights splashed across the houses like a bad movie scene. 2 patrol cars rolled to a stop in front of my driveway, lights flashing, engines idling. The music cut off. The garage went quiet. Karen reappeared, this time standing proudly on her lawn, phone still in hand. She wore a smile so smug it could have powered the neighborhood. One officer stepped out of the car, hand resting casually near his belt. "Evening, folks. We got a noise complaint." Karen rushed forward. "Finally. I've been telling them for months. This house is a problem. Illegal gathering. Drinking. Disturbing the peace." The officer glanced past her and into my garage. That's when his expression changed. Because sitting on the folding chairs, leaning against tool cabinets, and standing around the grill were men and women who knew exactly how to wear that calm, alert posture. Short haircuts. Athletic builds. Familiar watches. Familiar boots. One by one, heads turned. Someone quietly set down a drink. Another reached into a pocket, not fast, not dramatic, and pulled out a badge. Then another. And another. The officer froze. Mike stood up slowly, smiling. "Evening, officer. Off duty, get together. Department softball win. You know how it is." The second patrol car door opened. That officer took one look into the garage and muttered, "You've got to be kidding me." Karen blinked. What is this?" I finally spoke. "Just a garage party." One of the women near the grill raised her badge at chest level. "City PD." A guy near the back added, "County Sheriff's Office." Mike shrugged. "State Trooper." The silence that followed was heavy. The original officer cleared his throat. "Ma'am, did you say this was a noise complaint?" Karen's face drained of color. They were loud. And suspicious. And the officer gently cut her off. "Ma'am, the decibel level is well within ordinance. And this gathering is very much legal." Karen's mouth opened.
Closed.
She looked at the flashing lights, then at the badges, then at me. This wasn't the ending she'd imagined. The officer turned back to us. "Sorry to bother you folks. Enjoy your night." As the patrol cars pulled away and the lights faded, the garage erupted in laughter. Karen retreated without another word, clipboard forgotten at her side. Mike raised his drink. "To Neighborhood Watch." I clinked mine against his. And that was just the beginning. You'd think that would have been the end of it. Normal people would take the hint, retreat indoors, and maybe reconsider calling emergency services over burgers and classic rock. Karen was not normal people. The next morning, I woke up to a familiar sight through my front window, her parked crooked across the street, sitting in her car with binoculars like she was on a stakeout. Clipboard rested on the steering wheel. Pen already moving. I sighed and poured coffee. By noon, the HOA email hit everyone's inbox. Subject: serious incident and ongoing violations. Immediate action required. Karen had written a novel. According to her, my house was now classified as a repeat offender location, hosting unregulated assemblies, potentially dangerous individuals, and my personal favorite, an atmosphere of intimidation. Intimidation. Because people laughed too loud. By early afternoon, my phone started buzzing. Mike texted first. She really doubled down, huh? Then Jess. HOA just asked if we're armed. I'm crying. By 4 o'clock, there was a knock on my door. Not police this time. HOA enforcement. 2 men in polo shirts with embroidered logos stood on my porch, holding tablets like shields. Karen hovered a few steps behind them, arms crossed, victory already written on her face. Sir, one of the men began, rehearsed and stiff, we've received multiple reports. Karen cut in, including last night's illegal gathering. We need to inspect the premises. I leaned against the doorframe. You need a warrant. They blinked. We're not law enforcement, the other guy said. HOA regulations. Don't override state law. I replied calmly. Behind me, footsteps approached. The garage door opened. Mike stepped out, still in gym shorts, badge clipped openly to his waistband. Is there a problem? Jess followed. Then 2 more friends. Badges visible. Calm faces. Very awake. The HOA guy stiffened. Karen's confidence wavered. This is harassment. They're doing it on purpose now. Mike smiled politely. Ma'am, you showed up at his home unannounced with no legal authority and demanded entry. That's not how this works. One of the HOA guys swallowed. We're just documenting. Jess tilted her head. Documenting what exactly? Karen snapped. They're abusing their status. They intimidated officers last night. I raised an eyebrow. By existing? At that moment, a black SUV pulled up behind Karen's car. Out stepped a man in plain clothes, older, calm, with a presence that made everyone straighten a little without knowing why. He walked up the driveway, pulled out a wallet, and flashed a badge, so briefly it almost felt intentional. Internal affairs, he said. Karen's clipboard hit the ground. I was in the neighborhood last night. The man continued evenly. Responding officers reported a false emergency call and harassment pattern. We're following up. Karen's voice cracked. I was just doing my duty as HOA president. He nodded. Calling 911 for non-emergencies can carry penalties, especially when it's repetitive. The HOA guys backed away like they'd suddenly remembered another appointment. Internal affairs turned to me. Any further contact from the HOA, document it. We'll take it from here. Karen tried one last time. They're planning another party. Mike laughed. Probably. We like burgers. The SUV drove off. The HOA men practically sprinted to their car. Karen stood alone on the sidewalk, face red, eyes darting, suddenly very small. She didn't say another word. That evening, the garage door opened again. Music played, quietly, politely, perfectly within ordinance. Karen's house stayed dark. And for the first time since I moved in, the neighborhood felt peaceful. But deep down, I knew something. Karen wasn't done. She was just regrouping. Karen regrouped fast. Too fast. 3 days later, the neighborhood woke up to bright orange notices taped to mailboxes like warning labels. HOA special meeting. Mandatory attendance. My address was highlighted. Circled. Underlined twice. Mike sent a photo to the group chat. Guess we're famous. The meeting was scheduled for Saturday morning at the community clubhouse, the same beige building nobody ever used except for grudges and power plays. I showed up 5 minutes early. So did Karen. She sat at the long table in front, flanked by 2 board members who looked like they'd already made a terrible life choice. A projector hummed behind her. First slide, already up. Community safety concerns. I took a seat in the back. One by one, familiar faces filtered in. Off-duty, plain clothes, relaxed, but attentive. Karen noticed. Her jaw tightened, but she pushed on. She stood, tapped the microphone, and put on her best concerned citizen voice. Thank you all for coming. Recent events have shown that certain residents believe they are above HOA rules. This meeting is to restore order and safety. She clicked the remote. Photos appeared on the screen. My garage. My driveway. Blurry shots of people laughing, eating, existing. These gatherings, Karen continued, have created fear in the community. Multiple residents reported feeling watched, intimidated. A murmur rolled through the room. I raised my hand. Karen ignored it. This HOA proposes new emergency bylaws, she said, voice rising with confidence, including mandatory event permits, random inspections, and immediate fines for noncompliance. That's when Mike stood up. Slowly, politely. Before we vote, he said, I think it's fair we discuss the evidence. Karen scoffed. You've had your chance. Jess stood too. Actually, we haven't. Another person rose. Then another. Badges didn't come out this time. They didn't need to. Mike continued. Karen, do you remember the officers who responded to your 911 call? She stiffened. Yes. Did any of them issue a citation? No. But did they determine a violation? No. But did they explain noise ordinances to you? Karen's voice faltered. Yes. Mike nodded. So you knew it was legal. Silence. Jess added calmly, and yet you filed 3 more emergency calls that week. Karen snapped. I was scared. That's when a man in the second row spoke up, someone nobody recognized. I'm with the city attorney's office. Every head turned. He stood, adjusting his jacket. We received records requests related to repeated emergency misuse and targeted enforcement. Karen's face went pale. The city attorney continued. This HOA has no authority to impose emergency bylaws that override municipal law. Any attempt to do so exposes the board to liability. The board members beside Karen exchanged panicked looks. One of them whispered, She didn't tell us that part. Karen slammed her hand on the table. This is a setup. I finally stood. No, I said evenly. This is consequences. I gestured to the room. You tried to scare us. You tried to abuse emergency services. You tried to single out one house because you didn't like the people in it. Karen's voice cracked. I was protecting the neighborhood. The city attorney shook his head. Ma'am, you were harassing it. A vote was called. Not on new rules. On Karen. The result wasn't close. Effective immediately, she was removed as HOA president pending further review. Karen stood there, frozen, as the gavel came down. No applause. No cheering. Just quiet finality. She gathered her papers with shaking hands and walked out without looking back. As the meeting ended, Mike clapped me on the shoulder. Garage next Friday? I smiled. Within ordinance. Outside, the clubhouse doors closed behind us. And for the first time, Karen wasn't watching. But something told me this still wasn't over. Because people like her never let go quietly. Karen disappeared for exactly 12 days. No binoculars. No clipboard. No passive-aggressive emails written in bold font. The neighborhood exhaled. People waved again. Kids rode bikes without parents peeking through blinds. Someone even painted their mailbox without filing a request in triplicate. That's when the certified letter arrived. From law offices of Brightwell and Associates. Notice of intent, private nuisance, and civil action. I laughed out loud. They were suing me, not the HOA, not the city.
Me.
For emotional distress, loss of quiet enjoyment, and community destabilization. Apparently, my garage had shattered the peace of her soul. Mike read the letter twice, then handed it back. She hired a lawyer who charges by the adjective. Jess shook her head. Let me guess, she's representing herself as well? Worse, I said. She's representing the truth. The first hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday at Small Claims Court. I showed up early. So did Karen. She walked in wearing a blazer 2 sizes too sharp, hair pulled tight, stack of papers clutched like armor.
She didn't look at me. Didn't have to.
Her posture screamed confidence. Until she saw who was sitting behind me. Not in uniform. Not together. But unmistakable. The bailiff called the case. Karen launched immediately. Your Honor, this man has repeatedly hosted gatherings that attract aggressive individuals trained in violence. Their presence alone created fear. I feared retaliation. I feared surveillance. The judge blinked. Ma'am, were you threatened? Well, no, but they looked threatening. I stood when prompted. Your Honor, may I submit evidence? Briefly. I handed over a neatly organized packet. Noise ordinance, compliance logs, HOA meeting minutes, body cam summaries from responding officers, and last but not least, 911 call transcripts. Karen's eyes widened. The judge skimmed, then looked up. Ms. Karen, you called emergency services 4 times after being informed no violation existed. I was anxious, she said quickly. The judge nodded slowly. Anxiety does not convert lawful behavior into a nuisance. Karen turned to me, desperate. He orchestrated this. He surrounded himself with authority figures to intimidate me. One of the people in the gallery stood, not dramatically, just enough. Your Honor, the judge said, recognizing him. Good to see you again. Likewise, the man replied. For the record, we were friends before the barbecue. That was it. The judge dismissed the case in under 5 minutes. Then came the warning. Ms. Karen, further misuse of emergency services or frivolous litigation may result in sanctions. Karen's shoulders slumped. She left the courtroom without speaking. Outside, sunlight hit the steps just right. I stood there for a moment, breathing it in. Mike grinned. So, burgers tonight? I nodded. Low volume. That evening, the garage door lifted once more. Music played. Laughter followed. And across the street, Karen's house stayed dark. No lights. No watching. No calls.
For now.
But experience told me something important. When someone loses power publicly, they don't forgive. They wait. And somewhere deep down, I knew. Karen was planning her last move. Karen's last move didn't come with sirens. It came with silence. No emails. No letters. No drive-by glares. Weeks passed. Then a month. The garage parties became normal, almost boring. Burgers. Music. Laughter. End by 10. People brought kids. Someone started a cornhole league. Another neighbor donated lights, so we didn't have to keep the door half open. The street healed, which is why nobody noticed the paperwork. It started small. A neighbor mentioned their trash pickup was suddenly under review. Another said their fence approval had been reopened, approved years ago, now flagged for nonconformity. A third got a warning about lawn height that was measured down to fractions. Patterns emerged. Every notice referenced archived HOA bylaws from before Karen's removal. Bylaws that weren't active. Bylaws that had been quietly refiled with the county. Mike frowned when he saw the documents. These didn't just happen. Just check the filing dates. Someone reinstated them. Retroactively. That's when we checked the county clerk's office. Karen's name was there. Not as HOA president. As administrative filer. A volunteer role nobody paid attention to, buried deep in the paperwork chain. A position with just enough access to submit documents without triggering alerts. She hadn't come back loudly. She'd gone underground. The next HOA meeting was packed. Karen sat in the back this time. Quiet.
Calm.
Almost pleasant. When questioned, she stood slowly. I only corrected clerical oversights. The community deserves consistency. The board hesitated. They were tired. Afraid of lawsuits. Afraid of conflict. That's when an elderly man stood, Mr. Alvarez, who'd lived there longer than anyone. My fence has stood for 22 years, he said gently. You approved it, Karen. You complimented it. Karen smiled thinly. Rules change. Mike leaned toward me. That's it. The board voted to pause enforcement. Karen didn't argue. She simply packed her bag and left. The next morning, the city showed up. Not police. Inspectors. Permits.
Zoning.
Surveys. Not just my house. The entire block. Someone had filed a comprehensive compliance request, citing safety concerns and historical inconsistencies, triggering a mandatory citywide review. It was legal, it was clever, and it was exhausting. By sunset, neighbors were furious.
Not at the city.
At Karen, people knocked on my door, angry, tired, scared of fines they couldn't afford. I didn't host a party that night. Instead, I hosted a meeting. No music, no grill, just folding chairs and voices. We documented everything. Timelines, filings,
Names. Dates.
Jess made calls. Mike made others. And 2 days later, the city inspector returned, this time with someone new. A compliance auditor. Independent. Neutral. He reviewed the filings, the reinstated bylaws, the emergency requests. Then, he asked one question. Who initiated this volume of actions without board approval? The answer was obvious. Karen was summoned. This time, she didn't smile. The auditor's conclusion was short and final. Abuse of administrative process. Targeted harassment. Misrepresentation. All filings were voided. Her volunteer access was permanently revoked. And a formal notice was issued, one that followed her name wherever she tried to file again. Karen stood on her porch that evening as the notice was delivered. She looked smaller than ever. No clipboard. No power. Just a woman watching a neighborhood she no longer controlled. That weekend, the garage door opened again. The grill fired up. Laughter returned. And when someone raised a drink and asked, "To what?" I smiled and said, "To knowing when the noise is worth it." Because sometimes the loudest thing you can do is stand together. You'd think that would be the ending. Karen stripped of access. Filings voided. The neighborhood finally free. But power doesn't always disappear when it's taken away. Sometimes, it just turns bitter. A week after the auditor's decision, the first anonymous complaint hit the city portal. No name. No return address. Just a detailed report alleging ongoing gatherings involving law enforcement personnel, potential intimidation of civilians, and misuse of authority. The language was polished. Legal. Careful. Too careful. Then came another. Then 2 more. Different wording. Same theme. The city didn't ignore them, but they didn't panic either. They scheduled a community mediation session. Neutral ground. No accusations. Just concerns. Karen attended. So did half the block. The mediator opened calmly. "We're here to resolve lingering tensions." Karen spoke first. "I don't feel safe," she said, voice soft, practiced. "Every time that garage door opens, it's a reminder that I was publicly humiliated." The room went still. I stood slowly. "You weren't humiliated. You were held accountable." She looked at me, eyes shining. "By people with power." Mike exhaled. Jess folded her arms. The mediator nodded. "Is there evidence of intimidation?" Karen hesitated just a beat. Not direct, but implied. That's when the mediator turned to the city representative. "Any violations on record?" The rep shook his head. "None. Not a single citation. Not once." Karen's shoulders sagged. The mediator closed her folder. "Then this is not a safety issue. It's a personal conflict." Karen's mask cracked. "I gave everything to this neighborhood," she snapped. "And you turned it into a bar." A neighbor spoke up. "You turned it into a courtroom." Murmurs of agreement filled the room. The mediator issued her recommendation. No action, no restrictions, and a note placed on the complaint history marking prior misuse. That mattered. Because once a pattern is documented, future complaints don't carry the same weight. Karen left early. A few days later, a real estate sign appeared in her yard. For sale. People pretended not to notice. But everyone did. The open house was quiet. No crowds. No offers. Weeks passed. Then one evening, as the garage door was closing, Karen walked across the street. No clipboard. No phone. Just her. She stopped a few feet away. "I never meant for it to go this far." I nodded. But it did. She looked past me, into the garage, at the lights, the neighbors, the easy laughter. I wanted control, she admitted quietly. I thought that was the same as safety.
I didn't argue.
She turned and walked away. A month later, the house sold. New family. Kids. A basketball hoop in the driveway. The first time they heard music from the garage, they smiled. And that's how it ended. Not with sirens. Not with lawsuits. But with a door closing.
And another one opening.
For good.